Hello dear students, I welcome you all once again to my class number 14 in this series of virtual classes that we are having as part of this ongoing lockdown that we have to endure. Now, in my last class, I talked about the natural law in Middle Ages, wherein I talked about natural law in Dark Ages first and then the reformist phase in Middle Ages. Firstly, in Dark Ages as to how the natural law came to be interpreted, giving complete authority to church over state. And secondly, in reformist phase, how at the hands of a Christian cleric named Aquinas only, the state was extricated from the clutches of the church. Now, in my today's talk, I'll be discussing something very important, which is known as the theories of social contract in natural law. Now, from 16th century onward, with the advent of what is known as the period of Renaissance in history, individual came to be the center of the universe's concern, and therefore emerged the idea of individual rights, and this therefore was to be reconciled with the authority of state, because if individual were to be the center or focal point of the universe's concern, then the state's authority to rule, wherein individuals' concern is not addressed, depicted an ostensible conflict between individual and state, and therefore came theories which tried to reconcile the existence of individual, concern of individual, and at the same time authority of state. These are the theories that we know as the theories of social contract, which try to justify the authority of state with obviously subject to different conditions which are attached. It started with Hugo Grotius, and then followed by Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and finally J.J. Rousseau. So we'll take up these theories of social contract one by one, starting with Hugo Grotius. So, social contract theories, there is also a debate as to whether social contract theories are historical facts or simply postulate of reason. A great German philosopher, Immanuel Kant, says that social contract theories are actually postulate of reason and not depiction or enunciation of historical facts. But somebody like Hugo Grotius calls it a historical fact. But the fact that we also study social contract theories as theories perhaps also suggests the fact that these are more postulates of reason than historical facts. But that does not mean that there is no resonance of social contract theories with reality. But probably it is difficult to argue that social contract theories are actually the enunciation of historical facts, and also because of the variance that you find in the different social contract theories. So which one is actually a depiction of historical fact and which one is not is also hard to argue. Now, starting with Hugo Grotius. Hugo Grotius, we all know as somebody who is known as the father of international law. So his social contract theory was also mainly concerned with his concern for having a stable international order, which according to him was only possible if there is a stable state. And therefore he argued that social contract is something which precedes the creation of the government, and nature of social contract can be anything. So the people can actually agree for an absolute dictatorial rule to a libertarian regime, whichever way they feel they deem it fit. But once they have chosen the form of government, the government acquires the right to rule in a manner that the people who have chosen it do not have the right to question it. So this again paves the way for a stable state, which for Hugo Grotius was indispensable for have an international legal order which is stable and robust. And this therefore is the first theory of social contract, which was mainly given from the point of view of having a stable international law regime. But when we talk about social contract theories, you will often find three names: Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau. So starting with Thomas Hobbes, a British philosopher who was writing during the period of civil war in United Kingdom, and he was mainly interested in emphasizing the authority of state, but equally cognizant of the fact that Renaissance has given rise to this concern of individual becoming the focal point of the universe, and therefore he identified the inalienable natural rights of individuals. And according to Hobbes, in the natural state, though every individual possesses natural rights, but at the same time, individuals do not know the limits of their rights, and therefore every individual is a threat to other individual. And but at the same time, self-preservation is a natural instinct which every individuals possess. And with a view to self-preserve, individuals have actually entered into a pact of subjection with the state, whereby they have transferred in absolute terms to state the authority to govern, and thereby even transferring their natural rights. And the result is that you have the state coming into existence which is absolute, and the individuals having no authority to actually question it. His famous work Leviathan, published in 1651, narrates this concept of social contract theory, giving rise to an absolutist state. Thomas Hobbes' theory is followed by the theory of John Locke, another British philosopher who was writing during the times of Glorious Revolution. And he happened to be somebody who has greatly influenced the modern day concept of constitutionalism. And it is also said to be the main influence behind the drafting of Bill of Rights in the American Constitution. Now, John Locke, unlike Thomas Hobbes, does not recognize the fact that man in this natural state is actually in a state of war, not knowing the extent of their rights, and therefore every man is a threat to other man's liberty. He argues that man in the state of nature is not in a state of war, but what they actually lack is organization. And Locke also recognizes the natural rights of individuals, and he was mainly concerned about the natural right of property of individuals. So this is also an important turn, because in Dark Ages, private property was reflected as something which is an embodiment of sin. Whereas now you have in social contract theories a very important philosopher, John Locke, actually talking about private right to property as a natural right. And therefore John Locke argues that men in that natural state have actually come together to form a union. And after having formed that union by way of a pact of union, they have collectively decided to give the authority to govern to the government, by way of whereby they have authorized the government to rule. But this authorization to rule is subject to the trust which every government has to undertake, and that is to remain true to the natural rights of the people. So state holds the authority to govern in trust, and that is a very important aspect of John Locke's theory. So the state in John Locke's theory is not absolute, unlike Thomas Hobbes. The state is actually a limited one, something which is very akin to the modern day concept of constitutionalism. And finally, you have the theory of Rousseau, who was who argued that that there is no pact of subjection between the people and the state. In fact, he also recognizes the natural right of freedom and equality which every human being possesses. But but what he also identified is the lack of organization through which this natural right of liberty and freedom can actually be protected. But what is important is that the Rousseau tries to justify people's sovereignty, and he calls it volonté générale, VOLONTE GENERALE. I repeat, volonté générale, VOLONTE GENERALE. So people's sovereignty, or the general will, he emphasizes on it. So and what is also intriguing is that though he emphasizes on people's sovereignty on one hand, but at the same time he argues about the inalienable rights of freedom and equality of all men. The construction used by Rousseau for the proof of these contentions is once again the social contract, used more clearly than with previous writers as hypothetical construction of reason and not as a historical fact. Rousseau's deduction of the natural freedom and equality of men differs fundamentally from Hobbes and Locke. The latter both base the systems on the egoism of self-centered individual, and it is at that very contention which Rousseau opposes in his enthusiasm for the primitive self-contained community in which people live harmoniously. So this is what this is intriguing, that he is arguing for natural inalienable rights of people, but at the same time also arguing for what is called the community will, or the voluntary generale, or the general will. And the sovereignty is actually something which vests in the people, and people's sovereignty is what he calls volonté générale. And taking this forward, Rousseau says that by social contract, men unite to order, to guarantee their rights of freedom and equality by the state. The state therefore derives its existence, its justification solely from the guarantee of freedom and equality. And what is important also is that having received this from men, it restores them not as a natural but as a civil rights to all. The state and the state law thus remains subject to general will, which creates the state for the better protection of freedom and equality. So this is very interesting. So he is recognizing individual, but he is also recognizing the collective general will, calling it volonté générale. And this volonté générale has actually come to exist by way of a pact of union between people, and this volonté générale itself has given rise to this authority to state to govern by remaining true to the promise of protecting the liberty and equality of state. So this is another innovative social contract theory, wherein there is no pact of subjection between people and the government. So what you see in the three social contract theories of Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau is the following: that in Thomas Hobbes's theory, you only find a single pact of subjectionists between. You find that each individual has actually entered into a pact of subjection with the state, transferring the authority, the absolute authority, to govern and rule. So there is only the existence of pactum subjectionis between people and the government. Next, you have the John Locke's theory of social contract, wherein you find that the first people have come together by way of a pactum unionis, and by way of a single pactum subjectionis, people have collectively transferred the authority to govern to the state, subject to the condition that the state shall remain true to the natural rights of the individuals. Likewise, what you see in Rousseau is that there is a single pactum unionis among the people, whereby people have actually given the government the right to govern with a view to preserve their natural right of freedom and equality. So there is no pactum subjectionis here. There is only a pactum unionis. So thank you very much for listening to my talk today. Hope you could understand the various nuances of the social contract theory that we discussed. In my next class, I'll talk about modern natural law. So till then, thank you very much. And if you have any questions and observations to make, please feel free to write to me at manvendradnlu@gmail.com. Thank you very much. Have a good day.